there's going to be all sorts of interesting things happening with Roth. And so it it behooves for people who are having enough struggle, are on the struggle bus for what happens with their plans. You don't want to end up at the end of the year going, oh my God, I didn't know that they'd have this much money. I gave them a bonus. They went above this. Wow, it's Roth. It's not Roth. Now we've tested it. My TPA is saying I need to do this kind of refund or do this or have this happen. Everybody's going, do I have to redo certain tax forms? I would just really like to stay ahead of the chaos a little bit. And that's what, for me, part of this is. So when you talk about multiple employers, all of this stuff is true. It just, more data, more people, more the baseline's true. It's just more complexity.
Right. Okay. Normal universe, where we've been talking about a single employer, not even a controlled group, just a single employer. Okay. So let's expand it to a controlled group, which is two different employers, but enough common ownership that it counts as a single employer for ERISA purposes. Now, what we have to remember, sidebar judge, is that the 402G limits, the deferral limits, are always per calendar and are always per individual taxpayer. So if you work at 7 different employers, you work full-time at Wendy's, you work full-time at Dominic's, oh, sorry, that's a defunct grocery store, you work full-time at Ford, you work full-time at Microsoft, okay? 4 different completely unrelated companies. That is not for 402G limits. That is not $90,000 of deferrals. That is one deferral. So that is a constant, which is still going to get confusing with one of the variations you put in there, okay? So now, if you have a controlled group, again, we're going to add up box 3 of your W-2. So that's presuming both entities are S-corps with a W-2. One entity is an S-corp with a W-2, and one entity is an LLC taxed as a partnership where it's a K-1. Yes, you get to add up their compensation for plan purposes, but the way I'm reading it, I would love for somebody to tell me specifically I'm wrong, since what I read yesterday, recently, was box 3 W-2. That person has one W-2, and if that W-2, that's what you look at to determine if they're an HPI. Okay. Again, you've got controlled groups. You add up their W-2s to determine if they're over 145, because that's part of that plan. Now then, if you have multiple employers, you can have a multiple employer plan or somebody working for multiple employers. Okay, so multiple employer presumes there's not enough common ownership to count it as a single employer. Okay, maybe there's 30% common ownership. All right, it's not an affiliated service group for those of you who are reading ahead. Okay, it is 2 separate employers, 1 person. Okay, so again, they've got $140,000 in W-2 in one company and $140,000 in a separate employer, same plan, different employers. That is not 145. That is not an HPI.
What's the value of a retirement plan consultant, right? And it's just like, most people will not understand compensation to the level that they understand how this works. It's interesting to watch Christopher and I. He can read an announcement and understands it in a concrete way that even I, with 20 years in the business but don't do plan compliance, I kind of missed something, right? So it's showing there is value on how we're going to do that. But the one thing is, Christopher does get lost in those things when I really want to ring the bell right now of get your plan in order so you don't feel as much of this pain.
And all of our plan sponsors have added Roth and have catch up, and will have super catch up, which we haven't even talked about yet. So the idea is to give your plan sponsors options. Why take an essentially free option away from a participant or a plan sponsor? I don't understand the reason for that.